Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. We're spending more time in Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School in the book of Acts than maybe we have in a lot of other books in the Bible. But Acts is so full of some great stories that tell us about the formation of this church, this body of believers that God has brought about through the suffering death of His Son and the work of the Holy Spirit. Acts chapter 12 is kind of an interlude in all of that. It kind of gives you three stories basically, that are kind of background stories, and then it will go on with the development of this growth of the church. The first story is kind of a sad chapter. We're told in chapter 12, verse 1, about that time Herod, this is Herod Agrippa I, who is the grandson of Herod the Great, the Herod that killed the babies in the Christmas story. So his grandson, Herod Agrippa I. About that time, Herod the king laid violent hands upon some who belonged to the church. He killed James, the brother of John, with the sword. In chapter 12 of Acts, in about 42 to 44 AD, the first of the 12 apostles is martyred. James is the brother of John, and you remember the fishing conglomerate was Peter and Andrew the brothers and James and John the brothers. Well, James is gone. And he's gone not at the hands of the Roman government in Rome, but at the hands of the local provincial government under Herod Agrippa I. James, the first martyr, and now there are no longer the 12, except that if you count the Apostle Paul and Matthias, whom they chosen, you are back to 12 again. We're told then that Peter was imprisoned during that same time of persecution. The other folks, the other Christians are worried. Well, they have right to be worried. Herod just killed James, so is Peter next. So they're locked up in the house of Mary, the mother of John, whose other name was Mark. So John Mark, probably the author of Mark's Gospel, and certainly the John Mark who goes with Paul and Barnabas on the first missionary trip. They're in his house, and they're praying. And what are they praying for? They're praying for Peter's safety, for Peter's release. While they're praying, this story cracks me up. This just wipes me out. While they're praying, there's a knock on the door. Rhoda, who's most surely praying with them for Peter's release, goes to the door, looks out, sees that it's Peter, and doesn't believe it. They're praying for him to be standing out there, and nobody believes that he's really standing out. She goes back and tells the others, and they say, no, you've seen his ghost. He must surely be dead. You've seen his ghost. I get kind of a kick out of this because a lot of times we make a big deal out of, you must pray with enough faith. You must pray with enough faith. These people are praying with almost no faith. They don't believe this is going to happen. They have faith in Jesus Christ. They have faith in God, but they don't believe that God's going to answer their prayer, evidently, because they are absolutely shocked that Peter's standing out there and that God has released him from prison. That young lady's name is Rhoda, by the way, who goes to answer the door. Herod will get his comeuppance after Peter's released. In verse 20 of chapter 12, Herod was angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, and they came to him in a body, and having persuaded Blastus, the king's chamberlain, they asked for peace because their country depended on the king's country for food. Tyre and Sidon are in Phoenicia. On an appointed day, Herod put on his royal robes, took his seat on the throne, and made an oration to them. So he speaks. And apparently he speaks incredibly eloquently. Herod Agrippa is probably a great orator. Because, we're told in verse 22, and the people shouted, the voice of a God, not a man. The punchline? Immediately an angel of the Lord smote him because he did not give God the glory, and he was eaten by worms and died. Usually that one doesn't make your Sunday school lessons. Josephus, a first century Jewish historian, does confirm that after that speech, Herod was stricken and died of a mortal illness immediately after that, after the people had installed him as God and he accepted those kind of accolades. Josephus also helps us date this. This is AD 44. or about 14 to 12 years after the suffering, death, and resurrection of Jesus. So this is where the church is. We have just begun to make inroads into bringing that gospel message to Gentiles. Actually, the only inroad so far that we know of is Cornelius. And we've made inroads into bringing it to Samaritans, but we still have that stumbling block of how does this gospel get to Gentiles? Only Peter has really made that leap at this point. And to what extent he's made the leap remains to be seen. God is at work. He's at work in Peter's life when he's in prison here. He's in work even in that death of James as that empowers and emboldens the disciples even further. And he's at work as he removes Herod Agrippa I from the scene, and the gospel will grow and be spread.